particularly to ICG. So if you don't have access to ICG, so there is a very good paper on diagnosis of idiopathic polymodal choroidal vasculopathy just based on the OCT. So why these PED is important?
There is any leaking of the neovascular membrane or growth of the choroidal neovascular membrane. So it is important to treat them by anti-VEGF because if the fluid anti-VEGF is mainly given to dry up that to decrease that neovascular membrane. Otherwise, it can lead to the fibrosis, RP atrophy, and also it can involve the intraretinal layer, which is more harmful for the visual.
So, what happens is in that, or a notched PED or a double layer sign. Double layer sign is the separation of the RP and the Brooks membrane and some hyperreflective material inside the PED. So these four signs, they are very important as a big PED, notched PED. We saw one case of that subretinal hemorrhage that shrinks with aflibercept injection. So it was a case of idiopathic polymodal choroidal vasculopathy. It was a case of PCV. So this OCT interpretation for the diagnosis of PCV, which was earlier diagnosed, gold standard was ICG. Okay, so with the advent, like with the OCT, these markers now we are able to अपन ICG को हटा सकते हैं, that invasive modality we can अपन वो हटा सकते हैं. With that OCT only we can go PCV. So while the diagnosis of PCV is important, so patient ने से कि रेटिना में तो फ्लूइड है, नीचे है, अंदर है, मेरे को तो एंटी-VEGF भी लगना है, but for the PCV, these OCT biomarkers are important. And this one the slide you said about the
should be meaning like gives you a good idea for the prognosis. It has a poor prognosis.
These are actually degenerative spaces, right? The ORT is degenerative spaces.
I will explain it
Further, yeah.
Now there are four types of PED: brucinoid PED, fibrovascular PED, hemorrhagic, and the serous. Now we will start from the retinal features of the OCT. As we already know, just when I would like to highlight this four keys because it is important to know why they are basically most of the people like fellows don't understand what is the difference between like ELM, which is EZ. That's why I have put this slide. First hyperreflective layer is the RP. Associated with there is a IZ. IZ is the intradilation zone. And then the second immediate hyperreflective layer is also known as the IS horizontal. But clinically we should know these two layers, that is ELM and EZ. The second hyperreflective layer is ellipsoid zone and third hyperreflective layer is the ELM. It is based on the photoreceptor layer, that is the outer segment and the inner segment. Photoreceptor degeneration and loss are the key cause of the visual decline. That's why it is important to know them. ELM, EZ and IZ are the most three structures which we should know for the photoreceptor layer disintegration. Integrity of the photoreceptor layer is strongly correlated with the visual acuity, while its disruption will lead to the poor baseline BCVA and the worse outcome even after the anti-VEGF therapy. Now we can compare this slide with the normal slide. As we can see here, the second and third hyperreflective layer are disrupted here. Again, we are continued here. So in this picture, we can say there is a photoreceptor layer degeneration associated with the intraretinal fluid. That's why this patient will get more anti-VEGF and also had a poor prognosis even after the resolution of the fluid. Third, next is the hyperreflective dots. Hyperreflective dots are a well-defined hyperreflective lesion on the OCT. Mostly its size is 20 to 40 micron. They are seen in the multiple retinal diseases, including the diabetic retinopathy, RVO, and CSF. They are found throughout the retinal layer, especially around the intraretinal cystoid spaces. The exact histopopulations are unclear, but HID are thought to represent a different cell population. It is consists of the activated migrating RP cells and lipid-laden microglial cells. Persistence of HRD is associated with a poor baseline visual acuity. After anti-VEGF therapy also, non-responders show persistent HID, while this responder demonstrated a rapid decrease in the HID. So the presence of HID, we can take patient where the anti-VEGF will respond more or not. But if there is a percent of HID after anti-VEGF, then they are the non-responder and will need more anti-VEGF. In picture here we can see there is hyperreflective layer shown by the white arrow, while in black arrow there is a RP detachment. Now outer retinal tubulation. They are the intraretinal tubular structure, mainly in the outer nuclear layer. They are found during the neovascular. Hyperreflective is in the ossety. Hyperreflective border correspond to the ELN and the photoreceptor inner segment mitochondria. Then now there are also types of ORT, but it is difficult to distinguish on the ossety, but one should know about it. That is, forming ORTs has no lumen, only ELM scrolling over the pH, while the formed ORT are the closed or hyperreflective border, which is commonly seen, while the open ORT is the incomplete hyperreflective borders. Here we can see there is a hyperreflective layer, hyperreflective space surrounded by the hyperreflective layer. Here also here. And it is associated with the MNV and the geographic atrophy. Represent the photoreceptor rearrangement due to retinal injury. That's why it has a worse visual prognosis. Anti-VEGF therapy does not prevent new ORT or replace existing ORT. Now, subretinal hyperreflective material. This is also one of the most important OCT marker, as we can commonly see in the practice. SHRM appears on the OCT as a hyperreflective material between the neurosensory retina and the RP. Here we can see the hyperreflective membrane between the RP and the groups. And the white stars is just the pigment equivalent attachment. Also, the presence of the SHRM is consistent with the worst visual acuity, regardless of its size and location. Even though we can appreciate there can be poor prognosis. In OCTA, we can differentiate between the vascular and avascular SHRM. It is important to differentiate between this because the vascular SHRM often persistent after anti-VEGF therapy also, and it is associated with the reduced treatment response. Reduction of SHRM over a follow-up is associated with the improved visual acuity.
One thing to read is that you very well mentioned about the subretinal hyperreflective material on OCT angiography, whether it is vascularized or non-vascularized. So only indication of intravitreal triamcinolone acetonide in cases of CNVM is that vascularized shrimp. Vascularized shrimp will respond much better to, you can mix anti-VEGF with IVT. You can give a combination, and that vascularized shrimp can respond more better to the combination of anti-VEGF with IVT. This one thing is to read, and we'll read more studies on this, about role of IVTA in vascularized shrimp. And also while seeing the OCT, I had one patient who had a big shrimp, but below that there was a massive subretinal fluid is there, and he was perception of light positive PLTR, and elsewhere he was given 3 Eylea and it was shrimp, and he said that this eye nothing can be done. So I told him, uncle, that we can try one more injection, because what they say is you should chase the fluid, so in order to gain maximum visual potential. So we injected the brolucizumab, and brolucizumab, it had a reduction, quite a good drying effect, and he had improved to finger counting 1.5 meter. So we should chase the fluid, and the shrimp also, if there is a shrimp and if there is a fluid there, the prognosis is guarded, but we should chase the fluid to attain the maximum visual potential. And the shrimp also consolidates. It can be fibrin, blood, and scar.
Now the retinal pigment epithelial tears. They are the disruption of the RP tears and the known complication of the neovascular AMD. Standard micron is the strongest predictor of the RP tear. On OCT, RP tears shows that the RP discontinuity, visual prognosis is variable and worse when the fovea is involved. Continuing anti-VEGF therapy is generally recommended to control the CNV and reduce fibrosis. These are the iteration. Vitreomacular alteration is not of that significant in case of the wet AMD. Just for a completion purpose, I have added it. But one should know what is the vitreomacular adhesion and the vitreomacular traction. It is important to know VMT and VMA as VMA involves a persistent vitreous detachment within the 3 mm of the fovea, while the VMT causes a foveal distortion due to traction. VMA is frequently observed in the exudative AMD and correspond to the site of the macular neovascularization.
So, like Dr. Aishwarya, if one clinical scenario, if you have a tense PED, suppose and you give a anti-VEGF and the patient comes back to you and with an RP tear, so what would you do? Would you observe or you continue, like it was the first injection, or you would continue with the injections?
Sir, then I would like to observe the patient for some time, for at least 2 to 3 weeks, repeat the OCT and then decide about the intravitreal injection. Yes.
I think you can continue with the injections, no? You can continue with the injections, whether, yeah, but after like 1 month, like what you have scheduled, first reloading doses, then if you follow the treat and extend or monitor and extend regimen, you can continue with the injections. So that was a practically very important point. Practically very important point that if there is an RP tear, you can always continue with your therapy, not an issue. Okay.
I can't do anything for the RP tear.
There was one very good study that we had a tall tense PED and Dr. Abhishek Kothari did a study. Like what he did is, he tall tense PED instead of intravitreal Avastin, he gave, as per the oncologist, he gave IV Avastin. Dr. Tolzana gave IV Avastin, admitted the patient, gave IV Avastin and it regressed beautifully, the PEDs. What happens is due to the fluid pressure inside the tense PED, when we give the anti-VEGF, so because of that pressure, the RP tear happens. But when we give the IV, there is no such pressure directly in the vitreous cavity. So it fluid regress, it responded very nicely systemically. So that was one of the, it is yet to be published by Dr. I have told him, I think so it is yet to be published, but I will look into the literature. Yeah.
Now the next is the sub-RP hyperreflective columns. They are the narrow vertical column of the hyperreflective beneath the RP. This defect may allow fluid, blood or neovascular tissue to pass into the subretinal percent of the neovascular area. Now the precordial clefts. Precordial clefts is the hyperreflective outwardly bored spaces located between the fibrous sub-RP space, as we can see in there. Because of the disease activity remain confined to the sub-RP space and respond to anti-visual therapy. Early appearance within the 6 months of treatment may indicate the worst prognosis due to associated complications like RP, hemorrhage, or tear. Here we can see there is a hyperreflective space just beneath the RP. And they show posterior hypertransmission on OCT also. It can be found in the healthy eyes and in the degenerative retinal diseases and the RP and the retinal or the RP atrophy. Initially thought to represent non-perfused gross choroidal vessel, they are now considered OCT correlates atrophy. But there has not proven any pathological significance and do not require any clinical intervention. Subfoveal choroidal thickness and choroidal volume. Choroidal thickness just from the below the RP and the choroidal. It is of it is of not that clinical significance. So I am not. It is the vascular component of the choroid.
Dilatation of the hilar vessels. So newer concept is that it is the vortex venous overload choroidopathy which is causing this dilatation of the Pachy vessels, and Pachy vessels dilatation is leading to the accumulation of the subretinal fluid. Then you have the pachychoroid spectrum, the pachychoroid pigment epitheliopathy, which is further leading to the pachychoroid neovasculopathy and the PCV. So in that PCV sense, it is that this thing is very important. So we have those high resolution OCTs, EDI OCTs, and that is very important. So that's and in the chronic phase, this you used to see these PEDs, and this is also because of the increased permeability of the choriocapillaries because of the vessels. So it starts from the vortex venous overload choroidopathy, dilatation of the Pachy vessels, that causes the pachychoroid. Then it leads to your pachychoroid neovasculopathy, PCV, and neovascular AMD. So choroidal thickness in the AMD patients, you have thinner choroids. But Dr. Giridhar from Kochi, there is a very good paper that even the PCV can happen in thinner choroid as well. So it is not always that PCV can happen in thinner choroid as well, and neovascular AMD will always have a thinner choroid. So, but PCV may or may not have pachychoroid, but majority of the patients we see PCV have a thicker choroid, the pachychoroid is there. But it can happen in thinner choroid. It is a spectrum. So it's CSR. Yeah.
I've seen, and when they get old, these are the same people who will have CNVM and PCV. So they are a spectrum of the same disease. These people will eventually have PCV when they are old.
Component of the choroid. It separates the vascular lumen from the stromal tissue in the choroid. It is calculated as the proportion of lumen area over total and less choroidal area. It is more stable than the choroidal thickness measurement. It may reflect the decrease in the vascular lumen relative to the stromal area, supporting the hypothesis in the AMD progression. As the sir was saying about the double layer sign, it is the upper band. It is a two hyperreflective band, one on the top of the another. The upper band corresponds to the RP and the lower band to the Bruch's membrane. It represents the space generated by the type 1 MS about the non-exudative age-related macular degeneration. As we can see, there is separation of between the two layers, and there is a two hyperreflective band. In PCV also, same here we can see there is a double layer hyperreflective here, and also here. The third case is of the CSI. Also, it can correlate with the OCTA. In OCTA, in A, B, and C, D, first image is of the non-exudative ARMD. This picture is of the PCV, and while this four pictures. Now, what are the limitations? That not all fluid pattern correlate with strictly with the vision outcome. Some biomarker may overlap with the outer retaining condition. Imaging quality and segmentation variability can provide objective insight into the neovascular AMD. They diagnosis, monitoring, and treatment and planning. And they use the post-night management of the patient with an AMD. Thank you.
Very nicely presented, Dr. Kirna. And one more point about that OCT angiography, there are various patterns on OCT angiography of CNVM. And with the good thing, with the advent of OCT angiography, we can rule out, we can diagnose the quiescent CNVM also. Quiescent CNVM, we can see the pattern, the new vessels we can see, but there is no active fluid or there is no active distinct fluid or CME associated with that. So we can observe and we can call them for anti-VEGF can be given. Some is there that quiescent CNVM, if they have a family history of CNVM or for myopic quiescent CNVM, they have a family history, then you can go and inject anti-VEGF early also. So that was one point I would like to highlight. And when the CNVM regressed on the OCTA also, there was a prone reappearance, like those regressed NV type, those vessels prone reappearance.